Hello. For context, this video is about the government policies at all levels that have directly led to the current housing crisis. The intended audience is broad, ranging from elected officials to the general public. Unfortunately, it's a long video as the issue is complex, but I will start with the solution or ask of government, and will then explain a pattern of poor policy decisions that led to this crisis and the obvious solutions to address it. I will address how all levels have benefited from the increase in home prices and the resulting increase in the tax they receive from each home, condo, or renovation or project. In March of 2025, we created videos forecasting the housing crisis. A prediction that starts for dwellings of almost all forms would be down 80% or more year over year. We also knew that this would impact the new revenue stream that municipalities, the provincial and federal governments were enjoying. We take no pleasure in being correct with our predictions, but unless there are changes, 2026 and 2027 could be worse. To be clear, this is not a result of the US tariff situation. We've been watching this increase in government fees/tariffs for the past decade and more, and knew it would damage our industry. I apologize if I seem aggressive, but the truth is that the situation was made in Ontario by poor policy, and we need your help urgently. Also, to be clear, this is not an across-the-country problem. Certainly BC has its challenges, but in many parts of Canada, home ownership is still attainable. Why? Because they took a different policy path in Ontario. We will explain this as we go along. And if you have watched TV shows and wondered why the majority of US homes are affordable, it's for the same reason. They have chosen not to impose massive hidden taxes on the industry. In recent days, we have heard some encouraging news that some municipalities are considering bold steps to revitalize the industry. To those who have taken the time to understand the issues and respond, thank you. If this goes through, well done, Burlington, for putting in the work to help our industry and homeowners alike, but please don't delay. If you find this discussion credible, please share this with your network, as we need to help educate ratepayers and elected officials alike. So to start, who am I and why should you listen to me at all? My name is Peter Turkstra, and I am the CEO of a 70-plus-year-old family business based in southwestern Ontario. With 11 lumberyards, manufacturing facilities, trim and door, and other specialty divisions, we employ about 300 dedicated, loyal, and customer-driven staff. As a reminder, these folks, along with almost everyone in the construction industry, worked straight through COVID and are not the type to be asking for handouts. We're a hardy industry, incredibly diverse, and not prone to asking for handouts or help. There is great pride in workmanship and working. As a supplier to the industry, we rely on builders, renovators, and trades to deliver cost-effective projects. Like almost all construction-related vendors, our profits have collapsed. If not for 70 years of saving, we could easily be out of business. Please trust that we are not whining. We are not only fearful of the situation, equally as troubling, we are also concerned about the lack of response to what is a very obvious collapse. And as mentioned, please don't assume that this is a Canada-wide issue. While clearly BC has similar issues, in many parts of Canada, development charges are very low, and because of that, they remain affordable, and the HST impact is less. So let's start with the ask. To all three levels of government, prepare a 10-year summary of the revenues you have received. This data will likely tell you all you need to know. Ask yourself, how did we get here? Why did we not react sooner? And what is our revenue forecast for 2026 and 2027? And then act. To be clear, the request is not just for first-time homebuyers, but for all homebuyers and types of construction. The vicious form of hidden fees and taxes has affected every part of the market, from townhomes to condos, from the rental market to renovations. No section of our industry has been spared. So, at the municipal level, you need to significantly reduce or fully eliminate all development charges and fees for a minimum of 2 years. At the provincial level, you need to re-index the HST immediately, but for all homes and up to $1 million or more. At the federal level, immediately implement the already promised 5% rollback on new-time homebuyers. Believe it or not, it's still not in place, and as important, expand this to all homes, as the first-time homebuyer definition will not be enough to effect change. Now, I'll transition to explain how we got here and how much our elected officials have added to the price of almost every form of new construction activity. To start, the tipping points. So the current practices of all three governments have added from $150,000 to $200,000 or more to the cost of any townhome or home in Ontario. Over the last few decades, red tape, bureaucracy, and a lack of accountability have also lengthened timelines for all forms of building. Unfortunately, some councillors follow their own personal views and dogma. This very dangerous new trend has led to vilifying the very builders and trades that will help us provide shelter and maintain affordability. Because these costs are included in the final price, most consumers are unaware they are paying for them. Despite the insane increases in HST revenue, which were never re-indexed, and municipal development charge increases, during the COVID mini boom, low interest rates, and a rising housing market, our industry was busy for a period. But this inefficiency charade could not continue, and when interest rates rose, the market crashed, as even the most basic townhome was no longer affordable in Ontario. A few points to consider. Adding $150,000 or more to any construction project leads to affordability issues. This is obvious. But remember that consumers pay these fees, even if embedded, and they also pay in their own personal after-tax dollars. And then as interest rates rose, this extra $150,000 or more can easily be doubled on a mortgage, which has rendered those fortunate enough to become, as they say, homeowners, house poor, which reduces their ability to support the rest of the economy. This is likely why many parents have had to help their children get into the market. In our discussion with councillors, MPs, and MPPs, we've been amazed at their lack of understanding of the 10-year trend. We've asked elected officials to analyze the data, the number of starts, the revenue generated, and the average cost per start. We're amazed that staff are not analyzing this for their own internal benefit. A comprehensive review of the last 10 years tells a story. A dramatic increase in government revenues paid for by new homeowners. And then many councillors do not fully understand what the intended uses are for development charges. Some even think they go towards the actual development of the projects, which, for the record, is the responsibility of the builders. Also, they tend to totally dismiss the annual property tax generated by any and all new development or improvements. Of course, now that these revenues have crashed, they are at a loss as to how to replace them. So the hidden truth. Most consumers do not know they are paying the federal and provincial HST, a combined 13%, and development charges. Yes, there is a portion of the HST that is a tax credit, but the HST itself was never re-indexed properly. The truth? None of the three levels of government has a prime focus on affordability, the health of the industry, or the future of skilled trades. Instead, they have directly benefited from inflation. Yes, by watching prices climb, they use this as a justification to reap more revenue. A few points worth highlighting. Municipal development charges have been increasing at an alarming rate in most municipalities. It's not uncommon to pay $80,000 or more for a townhouse and $100,000 or more for a home. And these consumer fees double as you move towards the Toronto market. As discussed, neither the federal nor the provincial government re-indexed HST as home prices increased. When HST on homes was implemented, the effective threshold was set at $400,000, approximately. At that time, it was a way of the government saying, don't worry, we will not tax entry-level housing. Then they watched and benefited as inflation took hold. As home prices increased and townhouses moved closer to $800,000 or more, the federal portion, 5%, and the Ontario portion, 8%, provided an incredible revenue stream for both the federal and provincial coffers. Please don't kid yourself. All three governments benefited significantly from this increased source of revenue. In fact, they have become dependent on it. As townhouses rose to 800,000, the federal government collected 5% on an extra 400,000, and the provincial government 8% on an extra 400,000. Significant revenues. Now, for some reason, some governments seem to vilify builders and developers, and I cannot understand why. This diverse group of entrepreneurs has built communities, provided employment, and is very generous. Charities depend on them. And I think as your ratepayers learn the facts about the truth of these new fees they have been paying for, their frustration will grow. And a few other facts. It appears there is over a $10 billion or more surplus of collected development charges in Ontario. I'm told there may be over $500 million in the city of Hamilton alone. These are unspent surpluses. Viewed differently, these are fees and tariffs paid by homebuyers, typically on a mortgage, doubling the cost to them. Now, there are very specific rules on how municipalities can spend development charges, but we cannot get clear answers on why they need to increase fees year after year with such large surpluses. Over the past decade, government staff have ballooned. Specifically, many municipalities went on a spending spree, adding more regulations, often for their own town, and increasingly complexity and costs. We were even hearing calls for audits to analyze how municipalities are using development charges. If I were to hold a seat on council, I would request this information from staff myself. All efforts to get transparent responses from the government staff and officials have been ignored. Surprisingly, the level of understanding from councillors and other elected officials is often shockingly low. Now, the unfortunate consequences of all the additional taxes and fees. As interest rates normalized from historically low rates, the market for all forms of construction collapsed. Townhouses, single detached, condominiums, and all forms of shelter simply collapsed. As many as 50,000 skilled tradespeople are or will be out of work, and likely more if you include all of us downstream. This lack of work also extends to every area of our economy, from less coffee to fewer vehicles, from no need for lumber to windows, roof trusses, plumbing, foundations, electrical, and all the labor that goes into a home or project. And as a note, the vast majority of these products are Canadian and local. All suppliers and trades feel the impact, and it's devastating. Even the large Toronto builders had no choice but to slash their professional team, from sales to planning, engineers to vice presidents. Nobody has been exempt from the pain. Now, tradespeople will have no choice but to leave the industry, a disaster for the future. And of course, the lack of construction has resulted in missing all targets set by the government itself. As it stands, there is zero chance of making the established targets. Zero. And during this time, rental prices have also increased dramatically. This is really painful, particularly for those with financial challenges. And in some cases, it is not hard to argue that this lack of affordability has led directly to increases in poverty. Now, from a government revenue point of view, Municipal development charge revenue has now totally collapsed. Federal portion of the HST revenue in Ontario has collapsed. The same as for the provincial portion, totally collapsed. Rather than reflecting and accepting their policies caused the crisis and speaking to their customers, many are still in blame others mode. The bottom line is that the housing crash has had an immediate impact on government revenues of all forms. At the same time, trade and all other unemployment are on the rise, a direct cost to people who have, in many cases, never been on unemployment. Now, the good news, if there is any optimism, the good news about our diverse construction industry is that the multiplier effect is quick and enormous. As indicated, almost all downstream suppliers are Canadian. Trades and vendors will immediately benefit from any uptick in construction. From lumberyards to all forms of manufacturing, the supply chain is weakened but still in place. And the trades are ready to get back to work. Now, the reality and the need for immediate action. We must act before the industry is completely devastated. If you don't act, I promise you that you'll move from the shock phase to a host of bankruptcies. In our industry, when businesses close, they are rarely reopened. We also expect massive levels of trade and related supplier and manufacturer layoffs and unemployment. This has already begun. But if you act immediately, we can start to get this back on track. Now, the challenge: please listen and then act. Please trust me, at this point, with little incoming government revenue, these rollbacks and reindexing should be considered investments. An investment in the industry and the associated trades, housing supply, rental inventory, and all those involved with construction. Please act immediately. We are almost out of time. Our original video was almost a year ago, and the situation is now dire. I'm also certain you have received updates from the various home builder associations. Please trust me, they are not exaggerating. If you believe I am wrong, please show me the data. I'm certainly available to discuss at 905-977-0656. Thank you for your time.